Hey, my name is Callum, and this is a more unique video. If you haven't watched my devlog yet, I recommend you do, and you can find it here. But today I am sharing my full, mostly unedited, interview with Jason Kisvarde. Also, while I did not include my face in this recording, I did turn on my camera for the entire interview to be polite. That is all, and I hope you find this as interesting and fun as I do. Well, it's great to meet you.
Great to meet you too. Thanks for reaching out. No, super fun. What I don't know, what inspired you to reach out in the first place?
Sorry to bother you. I have not seen a movie like that ever, and I don't think will see a movie like that ever.
Um, it's it was a special one. And I remember reading the script for it, and I mean, the script is exactly the movie that we made. It's a lot of times what they say is there's the movie you write, the movie you shoot, and the movie you find in the edit, and they're all different. This was Boots wrote that script, and we went out and we shot page for page, word for word, exactly the script as he wrote it. And in the edit, they edited it exactly as he wrote it. So to me, that's a rare case of seeing that happen. But I think he had been working on it for so long, for years and years, that
Mm-hmm.
he knew exactly what he wanted. Because I've also been on other movies where they kind of figure, I don't want to say they figure it out as they're going, but it evolves as the project is going on, and happy accidents happen, and you pivot, and sometimes it's actually for the better. But yeah, no, sorry to bother you. Very much was like Boots had a vision and he executed it, and it was awesome.
Yeah, I found that movie almost honestly more impressive than Everything Everywhere All at Once, because this one is in a whole new world. But Everything Everywhere All at Once, you got the multiverses, of course, but you're still in a mostly real world, in different time periods and situations. But sorry to bother you, that's all different. Like, I found that so interesting.
And I'll give Boots, the director, credit for a lot of that. We shot that up in Oakland, in Northern California, where Boots lives, and he grew up there and very much wanted the movie to. I don't know. It was kind of a caricature of that town, and that town has, very specific culture. Like with graffiti, with crazy bicycles. I don't want to say they invented takeovers where people are doing donuts in the
Mm-hmm.
intersection, but they've been doing it, for the past decade. And he actually wanted to do that. And sorry to bother you, but we just couldn't afford to actually do that. Um, and it was funny because he just kept saying things to the producers like, well, I know people. Let's just go out to the intersection and we'll shoot cars doing donuts. And they said, you can't do that for a movie because of insurance. And if somebody gets hurt, they can sue us. And he said, yeah, but well, what if we just take the camera and we go film one that's happening? And they just kept trying to explain. It was his first time making a movie. They said, look, like, yeah, we know that that's possible to go do that, but because of the liability, because we're making a product that somebody's paying for, there are people that could get sued if anything goes wrong.
Hmm.
So, but the point is, so I went up there from Los Angeles and spent the first week walking around Oakland with Boots and him showing me things like, look over there, like that's where the train stop is, and check that out, that's where this, what was his name? Old School Copes. And he was a guy that made T-shirts in the 1990s, and like all, it was just. I think it was. I think the T-shirt said "Kicking It Old School Oakland," and it was this very, hand drawn T-shirt. And apparently, this dude was selling them by the trunk load to high school kids. And that's what Boots was saying. In high school in Oakland, you had to have that T-shirt, and you had to hang out at this place. And so a lot of that movie is based on his experiences growing up in Oakland. but then everything is just heightened. You know, you take it's like he would say things like, "Oh, check out," because also everything's super funky up there. It's like it's an old hippie town. Um, you know, mom and pop stores, and you walk in and they're painted wild colors. So it was a lot of latching onto that and then amplifying it and making it, leaning into that even harder. So that's where that world building came from, is just it's a caricature of real life Oakland, just amplified. And because it was, kind of a weird, funny world, it's there are movies and things that you work on where realism is really important to everyone. Hey, we're making this medieval movie, and they wouldn't have had that axe, and the wrapping on it is all wrong, or this chair wouldn't be here in this time period. And those have their place in the world, but like with Sorry to Bother You, it's like throw it all out the window. Let's just do whatever we
Yeah.
want. Like, sure, it could be that car. Hey, let's just, that building is interesting. Let's go film over there. And a lot of times, that's where you can have a lot of fun, is when you're not trying to recreate something specific in the world. Um, so for you, when you're doing your own stuff, it's it's fun to draw inspiration from things, but not be so locked down into specific, or don't get caught up in the specifics. You can just riff on it and expand on it and make it a caricature. So with Everything Everywhere All at Once, they really wanted it to be, Los Angeles. Didn't necessarily, it wasn't necessarily exactly this year, but it was pretty specific, and they wanted it to be grounded in, this is very real. The apartment is very authentic to a Chinese immigrant family, and then it can get weird from there. But they wanted it, you know, they didn't they didn't let us get too weird. We had some fun with
Yeah.
it, but where Boots was just like, yeah, go crazy, hang things from the ceiling, get more colors. And we just kind of just kept going until we ran out of time and money to keep doing cool stuff.
I think that's what made it so much better, honestly. There was a lot more freedom, I'm guessing, on your end with like budget restrictions and design and production. I think that's what really made the movie. What I find most curious about it, though, this is where all my questions are going to spawn from, is the little miniature, like, for lack of a better word, stunts in the movie. I have this pulled up if you need reminders. When he's going on a phone call, he doesn't have a split screen. He actually falls into the room on the desk, and then everything falls apart. And then when he's getting all his money as a power caller, he's having his apartment upgraded, and the sheets are pulled out from under him, the lamps burst apart, and they grow. I thought, I've never seen anything like that, and I loved it.
Um, so yeah, so all of, let's see, the first one. So as it's written in the script, that's exactly how it's written. Is he's sitting there in his chair and he falls through the floor and lands in the building. And again, we had no money. So Boots is standing there and he says, Jason, how do we do this? And I said, okay, check this out. So we set up a cubicle. So it's in that actual office space, but we put a few of the cubicles up on stage risers. So it was, I don't know, 3 feet up off the ground. And that the actor Lakeith was standing there, and we made him, I'd call it a backpack. It was the back of the chair, but we cut it off of the base, and he just had it tied around his waist like a belt. So it was like a turtle shell on his back. So as you're looking at me here, he had the chair and you're the camera and he's sitting there.
Mm-hmm.
But in real, and there's the cubicle around him and the computer monitor, but in real life, he's standing up and there's room for him to drop down. So what happened is, I think we had the tabletop and the computer, and we had poles coming out of it off camera where you couldn't see, and we had a couple people standing there holding the desk with the computer. So as he's sitting there talking, they start to shake the desk, and Lakeith, all he did is just drops to his knees, and they cut. And it looks like he's sitting at his desk. Everything starts to shake, and he falls through the floor. And then I think what we did then we would go to the next set and shoot it, a week later. And I think all we did there was we had a similar lightweight desk set up, and it was just the last few inches of him, drop, and he would fall into place. But with those very quick cuts, it feels like I think he went through the floor. But all of it was just, knowing like how much can we cheat, and how, again, how fast and cheap can we do this, but it still feels like this stuff is happening. And this was, I think Boots was influenced a lot by like Michel Gondry. He saw Turn Down for What that the Daniels did, the music video, and referenced that a lot for the practical gags, because I was telling him that's how we did people falling through the floor in that music video. It was all cheating. We didn't have the money to build rooms where we could crash through ceilings. It's, we did build a piece of ceiling that people could jump through, but not in the real space. And it's all cheating. Like when you see somebody starting to go through the floor, we just built a platform that's 4 feet by 4 feet that could collapse 6 inches, and you start to see somebody fall through the floor and you cut, and then the next shot they're flying through the air, and it feels real if you cut it right. And then the stuff with the bed transforming, it went okay. And it was, he wanted to do that all in one. He wanted to make it feel like one shot where he moves from his garage apartment into the fancy apartment. And we had other ideas that I'm still mad about it to this day that we didn't get. We built all the pieces to do it, but what it was in real life is it was, the bed was just plywood with 2x4s, and we had people, and it had so it was a twin bed, and then it had wings that would fold up to turn it into a bigger bed. So we had just people hiding everywhere, and we had people tug the bed sheets, so the bed sheets flew off, and then the sides of the bed were like, you can kind of see it in the movie, but the bed starts to get bigger. And what we didn't do that I wanted to do so badly is we built a replica of the wall that's behind his garage bed with all of the stuff on it, but there was a break in the middle and it was meant to open up. So what I wanted to do was, we're in the real garage, the bed sheets pull off, the bed starts to flip up, and then we cut, and we're actually now in the fancy apartment with the new bed, but the old wall, and then the old wall was supposed to fly away, and you're in that space, which in real life was like across town in a different building on a different day. And we were running out of time, and the way they had, because they wanted to do this long shot where they pull up from the pillow and they pull back, pull back, pull back, and reveal the whole apartment. So what we were doing is we had set dressers standing there with the wall panel, and they had to pull it away, but then run backwards to be behind the camera person as the camera's pulling back and back so you don't see them. And the choreography of that just wasn't working. The wall would
Mm.
shake in a funny way, and they'd have to start over, and the camera would start to move, and then they'd start to run out, but you'd catch their arms, so we'd have to stop. And so I think after 4 or 5 tries, they said, we're not doing that part of it. We'll just pull out from the pillow. But the idea behind it was, again, it was written in the script, but without a way to, he didn't have an idea of exactly how to physically do it. But it was, I think, written in the script that his apartment, you visually and physically see it transform into his new place. The other thing that didn't work at all, which was such a bummer, I think the old TV splits open and is supposed to
Yeah.
become a flat screen TV, and then there was a lamp that I believe splits in half and becomes a
And
different
then it
lamp.
gets taller. Yeah.
So again, we had so little time and so little money, and the people that I had building those things were just, that wasn't what they were good at. They were good at other things, and they were doing all sorts of other stuff for the project. And every weeks would go by and it'd be like, hey, how's that TV? It was one of the last things we shot, I think on the very last day of the shoot. How's that TV set gag coming along? And they're like, oh, it's like it kind of does this. And I'm like, we shoot that in a week, and the lamp. So we're there on the last day of the shoot, and we had saved part of that. The garage was shot in a real garage, but we pulled the wall panels off with all the stuff and recreated it in a different space just to get that insert shot of the lamp. And it's just again not working, not working, not working, and we're running out of time. I thought it was just going to get cut from the movie, and they threw it in. It was like it looks bad, but I think that's the charm of the movie is that stuff is a little rough around the edges, even though it wasn't necessarily meant to be.
I mean, it didn't look rough to me, and I did really like it. I'm kind of curious how you like extended the lamp. That one kind of confused me.
If I remember correctly, it's we had the nightstand or whatever the piece of furniture was that it was sitting on,
If you want, I
and
can pull up the clip. I can share my
yeah,
screen.
please. I
Yeah,
haven't seen it in years.
I double checked this like last night.
Oh shit, I have not seen that in forever. How funny.
And it ends round
I
about here, nothing else going on. Yeah, but here was a TV you had,
yeah, go. Yep,
and then lamp.
yep.
Uh,
It's cute. It's not as bad as I remember. Um,
uh,
so what we did for the lamp is in real life, once again, that credenza was 3 feet off the ground, and we just moved the walls up. So that whole set was, if you ever watch a behind the scenes with the Muppet Show or puppets, where you don't realize, but the set is really way high up, so all the people can be
hmm.
underneath doing stuff with the puppets. So we did the same thing with that lamp. So that lamp pole was always a long lamp pole, and what we did is, I think with just fishing line, we pulled the shade apart, and then just somebody was sitting below it and puppeteered the lampshades taller. And again, because it's so quick and it's just 1 second long, you look at it and go, the lamp, it just grew taller. And it's like, no, it was always just one pole. It was always a tall lamp that we just split up taller. And then the TV set was a weird thing. And it kind of worked, but the idea was I think we had two pieces of metal welded that looked like L's, and we made a flat screen TV, and we took a graphic and we printed it on canvas or vinyl and stretched it over this frame with hinges. And if I remember correctly, all it did, so it's kind of floppy in fabric, and it just goes beep and stretches the fabric and becomes a flat screen TV. So that was because that was as it's written in the script, it was something like the lamp grows taller and it blossoms like a flower. And I think what he was wishing for is something just elegant like origami unfolding. And I'm like, Boots, like, yes, totally possible, just not. We just don't have the people or the time to like engineer this thing. It's a thing that's possible in the world we live in. Um, and the same with that TV set. It was written as like his TV set, his old CRT TV morphs into a widescreen TV. And it was the same thing. We're sitting there going like, that sounds like CG. And he's like, no, no CG. Everything has to be real. So that's when we started playing with the idea of like an inflatable TV or, this canvas stretching thing. So it was, that was part of the fun of it is that there was a cool script to work fun with these fantastic ideas, but then he handed that to us and said, figure out how to do these things. You have a few dollars in a week to figure it out, along with like 50 other things. So, in retrospect, I think some of the stuff worked, like the desk dropping, I think worked really well.
That was
all that
great.
transformation stuff is hard for me to watch because that stuff I wish I could redo, and I didn't realize how bad it was going to turn out, and I should have micromanaged that a little harder. But no, but again, it's a lot of times what I've found is when you're working on something with a low budget and you don't have a lot of time, sometimes that's your best work, and uh, you come up with really interesting creative solutions to get it done, and it's not always how you wanted to do it. Almost every time you're going to sit there and go, well, now that I've done it, I could do it better again. And you go, it already happened. There is no next time. This was it, and it's frozen and immortalized in time forever. But um, a lot of times I feel, and you'll see this with some directors as they get bigger and bigger over the years, and the budgets of their projects get bigger and bigger and bigger, and you go, you know what? Like something's lost, like the heart is gone, or Wes Anderson's an example where I love all of his earlier movies, and I'm finding them harder and harder to watch as the time goes on. They're gorgeous, and I happily watch it and just turn the sound off and stare at it because it's 2 hours of eye candy. But the it's because they have all the time and all the money that they need and want to do this. And I feel that some of the grittiness is gone. Um, and what's fun with Sorry to Bother You is it was done on an extremely low budget and very short time frame. So it was a lot of, it does, to me, it feels very rough around the edges and raw, which again, to me, I'm like, I want to go in and fix it and polish it and make it good, but maybe that actually wouldn't make it better.
Now, I've always believed that almost restriction creates innovation. Now, this isn't something you would know. This is something more on my side of game dev, not movies and directors and producer stuff. But there's these events called game jams people do, where you have a limited time frame of like 2, 3 days to make a game, and they'll have weird rules like you can only use 3 colors, only use your mouse. You have to have a theme around always moving, always exploding. And those games that they make are very often very janky, but when they come back around to them, like in a month or so, they go, there was a really interesting idea here. And those have actually created some of the best-selling games of all time, funny enough.
Well, and I think there's something to that where I know a lot of people in my life who are creative, artistic people who are trying to do projects, and they, whether it's making a movie or building a costume for a thing, and it never gets done because they're so hung up on there's no deadline and there are no parameters like this needs to be done on Wednesday no matter what, and here are your resources. They have in their mind infinite time to work on this thing. And something I like to say is art is never done. You could tinker on something forever because there's no right or wrong. It's not math. It's not like I solved the art and now it is finished and perfect. It's you can always come back to it and go, what if I tinker on this or tweak that? And that's a problem with, if you're trying to finish something. And what I lean into a lot is I'd rather get it done than make it perfect. And it's finished, it's done. And if I have more time, I can revisit it and tinker with it some more. But my nightmare, and I have several projects in my own life that have been taking way too long. And I'm constantly like, I gotta finish this thing, pulling it out, putting it on my desk. I'm gonna finish this thing this weekend because otherwise it just doesn't get done. So like what you're talking about, I think is such a smart exercise because you're forcing yourself. You're saying, make a dumb game, do your best, but get it done. And now that it's done, if you go back and revisit it, take some time, take some space, and come back to it. But for a lot of people, if you didn't go through that creative exercise, you might just say, I'm going to spend 7 years developing ideas and coming up with different concepts and not even getting to that next step. So that's something to think about, and I talk about a lot with people, is just like, just get it done, and then you can come back. I've been working on a script myself, and it's the first time I've tried doing this. And everything I've been reading and what I followed was just write the first draft, get it done. It can be garbage, and that's fine. It's meant to be garbage. But there are more people who are sitting there with unfinished scripts that might never get finished. It's better to have a finished, terrible script than this masterpiece that the world will never see, because you can always, once it's done, then you can go and keep zhuzhing it, until time runs out. But if you never even finish it and never show it to anybody, it might never get done or see the light of day. So that's, again, one of the biggest things I'm seeing with my own peers, myself, and most creative people, is this inability to just get things done. And to me, it's okay if it's garbage. Like, finish it, and you can come back and fix it later if you need to, or if you have time to. But just get it done and move on to the next thing, because that's how you evolve and improve as an artist, or just with anything in life. Is these not everything needs to be your best work or perfect. And I think so many people are afraid to put their name on something and put it out, and it's not well received, and that's terrifying. But to me, it's like, you know the world won't necessarily judge you on that, as long as you followed up with something better. And just, if that's the last thing you ever do, they'll be like, oh yeah, you're the person that did that one terrible thing. And I've definitely worked on bad projects and dumb things that, it didn't look the way I wanted it to, but I'll go out and do it again. And hey, that project was better. And as time goes by, if you have a volume of work that you've done, you don't have to talk about the stinkers. You can just talk about the few successes you had and say, hey, I did these, 7 cool things. Let's not talk about the 50 terrible things I also did. And that's important, is to just, whatever your craft is or your art is, like, just keep jamming stuff out. And if something does well, that's great. Again, it's dangerous to get too hung up on one idea and fixated on it and never finish it. That's what you want to do your best to avoid.
You mentioned, like, in your own scripts, like directors around you, they had like constant perfectionism and bad rough drafts. Do you think that you and those you work with fall more victim to perfectionism or like scope creep? Or you just want to include more and more and, oh, isn't this a cool idea? Wouldn't this be fun? Shouldn't we do this? Which one do you think is more common?
Both. I hate, that's a bad answer, but and that said, different people, I think, are more guilty of one than the other. Like, I know some people who, it's less about adding and adding, and it's more about just tweaking out on details. And that's a trap too, because nothing's ever going to be perfect. It's just not. I mean, when you start getting into Marvel movies and you're talking 100 and 200 million dollar budgets, like, yeah, sure, we can make it perfect. But that it's the most important thing with content is, and when I say content, that's like movies, television, games, commercials, anything, is it's the I like to say the idea is way more important than the execution. If the idea is good, people will forgive it being a little rough around the edges. Maybe that TV set transformation isn't super slick, but you forgive it because the idea was cool. So that's, I think, one trap. And I've worked with people that I might not work with again, because it's kind of a nightmare, where they're just tweaking out on stuff that's, and I'm like, this isn't a movie about a couch. This is a movie about these people. They're sitting on this couch, but why are we worried about what, the shape of the legs on the couch? Are we even seeing that? Jason, the taper is wrong. It needs to be, mahogany wood. And I'm going, why are we even talking about this? Like, this is the least important thing. And then the other one is like what you're talking about, like scope and scale creeping bigger. And, to me, I'm always terrified when somebody, a director walks up to me and says, "Hey, it'd be neat." And I'm like, "What?" Because that always means let's do something that we haven't talked about, and probably in an hour you're going to want this thing that we have to send somebody out in the world to go find very quickly. But to me, that usually comes from, it's usually like a lack of preparation. It's a lack of time because a lot of projects are really rushed into production, and the director's still coming up with ideas, and we're like, it's too late, we're making the thing, and they're like, but I have another idea, and you're like, at a certain point, it's done. We have to make, we're shooting the thing. So it's it's dangerous if it's something simple like an alt take on a line that somebody says, or what if we try it like this, that's easy and that happens all the time. But I've also seen it where it's, you know I know we're only supposed to be in this room in the hospital, but can we go down the hallway and shoot around to the corner over there? When I was at lunch, I saw this really great area, and you're like, no, that's I mean, like, it'll take me an hour or two to set up that area, and then you've got grip and lighting, and camera has to move, and they have to run electricity. It's just, sometimes it comes from a place where they don't. There are a lot of directors who haven't. They've never been on the crew side of things, and they don't necessarily understand what they're asking for when they ask for something. They know they want it. They're like, this is a good idea. Creatively, this will make sense, but they don't understand, like, this is 7 hours of work. This would then jeopardize us being able to get X, Y, and Z done. And this is on a shoot day, but also, like, in prep, it's the same thing where we're prepping a movie, we're talking about it, and if it's creeping in scope and scale as you're doing it, that time and money is coming from somewhere. That doesn't usually mean there's more time and more money to do these additional things. It just means that you're squeezing everything harder, and that movie and time, the money and time is coming from making this thing great. Now we're just, it's like, think of like a piece of toast and butter, and you have a knife, and the thinner you spread that butter, the less delicious each bite is. And that's something I've seen where the scope and scale grows to a point where everything just becomes mediocre. Like, the ideas were cool, but we didn't have, again, more money or time to execute these things. And it just all looks a little non-interesting. And it might have been better to just focus on what we have and let's make that better. So both of those things totally happen, and I think, if done smartly, are fine. It's when it gets out of control in either one of those categories, it gets dangerous in that it starts to make the project less good because you're wasting time or wasting resources or wasting time, which is the most important, because you can always theoretically get more money, but you can't get more time.
How would you describe the job of a production designer? What do you work with? What do you change? How important are you? Very important, but I want to get that on recording.
Yeah, yeah. So it's my job is to come in very early on a project. So you have the director, you have the producer. I'm usually one of the first people to get brought in after the project starts, because most of my job is in prep. Like the electricians, they show up on the shoot to plug things in, let's make it happen. My whole job is helping pick the locations. Are we building a set? Are we shooting on a real location? Why? For budget reasons. And it's, again, there's some projects that are so small, it's just a couple days, we're in, we're out, it's fine. But on bigger projects, especially movies or television, which I don't work in, but it's a few months of prep where you're scouting locations, you're talking about, okay, like on this page, but they go from here to here. Let's go back to the park and talk about where this is all happening. And then it turns into, for me, well, Jason, what would it take to make that happen here? And I'm like, well, there's no playground structure here, so we have to build that. And, I think we need a permit. So half of the job is daydreaming all the fun stuff that we're going to do, but then it's actually figuring out how are we going to do this thing. And I think on much, much, much bigger jobs, again, like Marvel size movies, the production designer is able to be a lot more, they can keep their head a lot more in the creative space because they have more people to figure out how to do it and execute it. But most of the stuff that I work on, I have to think up the ideas and a lot of times figure out how to do it and how to do it with a budget because I show up and they say, Jason, here's how much money and here's how many people you have to do this job. I was like, well, what if I need more? They're like, ask for it, but we're probably not going to give it to you. So then we go through the creative process of this would be cool. Let's do that. We'll build a wall there. This is where the thing's going to crash. And then I have to turn around and go, okay, shit. So we have like 6 weeks. I have 5 people. We've got this much money. You do this, you do that. And then what I'll have is an art director who is usually kind of like the get it done person. So they start to take a lot of those logistical tasks and actually run the construction crew who's building the set, and the art director is showing up and like, you've got 2 days to get this done, and no, you can't hire another painter. And then what my job, it's trying to keep me in the creative space as much as possible to come up with ideas as much as possible.
What are your top four favorite movies? Not necessarily what inspires you, but just what are your favorites?
Number one, Repo Man, 1984 with Emilio Estevez. Let's say the Blues Brothers. Is that 1979? I don't remember. The Blues Brothers. I have a couple new favorites that recently I've rediscovered that I'm enjoying a lot. Phantom of the Paradise from 1974. Brian De Palma. Just amazing, like super weird cult film, very rough around the edges, but it's like I think I saw it as a kid and it scared the shit out of me. And I rewatched it again a couple months ago and couldn't stop thinking about it. I was like, God, that's such a good movie. And I've rewatched it twice since then, which is very rare. Like I almost never rewatch a movie, and I want to sit down and watch it again. I've been listening to the sound. The soundtrack is mind blowing, and there's a whole story behind that. Anyway, Phantom of the Paradise, and then let's do another recent favorite that I just found this past year. Um, what's it called? Miracle Mile, which I think is 1987. And it's fun. Read the Wikipedia page about it and just the background behind the movie. Don't read the summary of the movie. Let it be a surprise. But how and when and why it was made was interesting. But essentially, it was a guy who went to film school, wrote this script, and Hollywood was very excited to buy the script, make the movie as a bigger budget movie. And he said, the caveat is I have to direct it and you can't change the ending. And they all said, nope, not interested. And it took about 10 years, but he found the money like to make it as a really low budget movie. And it's just, again, very rough around the edges, but the idea is so wild. It's like an it's like a love story on the eve of the apocalypse. It'll don't watch it before bed. It'll fuck you up.
I got
Um,
you.
and then I'll throw a fifth one on there. Life Aquatic with Steve Zissou. Um,
That's a good one.
one of just it's a to me it's a perfect movie.
What I
Um,
thought was really interesting about that movie is of all the Wes Anderson movies I've seen, I haven't seen all of them yet, but that is the only one with like an action slash combat scene.
it just it's I rewatched it again. Again, to me, what makes a movie exciting to me is if I want to rewatch it immediately. Like I watch the movie and I go, I could watch that again right now. I feel, I feel there was something I missed, or there were something so interesting about it that I want to live through it again. And that almost never happens. Most movies I watch, I go like, yep, cool. Don't ever need to see that again. Like that was fine. But these movies that I just gave to you are all movies that I have rewatched multiple times and find them like sources of inspiration, whether it's as a production designer or just as a creative person. They're I feel each time I've rewatched them, I've seen new things in the project or I've gotten new things out of it, and to me that's exciting, and that's the kind of stuff that I want to work on. It's like I want to make cult movies. I don't want to make Spider-Man 17. I want to make, Sorry to Bother You or other weird shit that I don't want to say that people haven't seen before because it's all been done before, but that that feel like a new fresh take, or the timing is perfect where you're like, man, the world needs this right now. And it's I feel most movies are not that. It's I don't know, like The Hangover
I agree.
4. Like, I don't
Yeah.
know, did we need that movie? Not really. Did it make money? Sure. But how many people are rewatching that for the fourth time? It's like it's meant to be something you watch on an airplane and you're like, that wasn't the worst thing.
I watched The Hangover on an airplane actually. It was from
It,
Georgia to Wyoming. I watched one, two, and three in the same flight.
and to me, it serves a purpose. It's entertaining. There's nothing
Yeah.
wrong with it. It's fine. It's just not, it's not the stuff that I'm personally excited. Like these movies that I'm throwing to you are like I'm each time I've watched them, I'm just like, fuck, that was crazy. I need to see that again.
Hmm.
Anyway, so those are my favorite movies right now.
That's fair. You have, I guess, regular people you call up for your movies that you just really like working with. I saw obviously your wife, Kelsey. You worked with her on almost everything,
Yep.
which I think is awesome.
We met working. So we worked on music videos together, and I did a lot of music videos when I was just getting started as a production designer. And this was like 2008, 2009, 2010. And at that moment in time, there was a recession. There was no money in music videos. Like they were making them, but the budgets were stupid cheap. And I needed people who would work for, $100 a day for 16 hours. And I was hiring like fresh out of college students who were like, yeah, I want to work in film. Like I can stay up all night, no problem. And I was hiring this guy named Jesse on a lot of them. And whenever we would need an extra helper, he would bring Kelsey along. And we worked on stuff together for 4 or 5 years, and became friends and would hang out outside of work sometimes. And she was dating somebody else, I was dating somebody else. And I think it finally just kind of happened where we're like, I really like you a lot. And we started dating. So we've done almost every project. We worked together for, you know, 8 or 10 years, and then we got married a couple of years ago finally. But we work on almost everything together. So all the movies, most of the music videos, most of the commercials. Every once in a while, she's busy doing something else. But yeah, she is like my partner on everything we work on.
I'm sure that makes it way easier too, having a, I believe, set decorator that you can just work hand in hand with, no problem.
Well, it's amazing because there's a shorthand. Like I can say things to her like, get a really funky old couch, and she knows exactly what I mean by that. Where if you say that to somebody else who you've never met before, they go, what does that mean to you? And then I go, oh shit, okay, let me pull some references. Like here are six couches. This is and explain what that means. But we're able to move a lot faster because of this shorthand and understanding, and we have a very similar aesthetic. Also, we will like carpool to work in the morning, and we'll be talking about the day as we're driving to set, or at the end of the day, we're having dinner together, and we're probably still talking about work and what we're going to do together. So uh, it's a very, as far as the work goes, it's extremely efficient. And a lot of production designers have usually an art director or a set decorator that is like their person that they work with on everything. And it's that person that they have a shorthand with, that they've had, they have a history together, and they are extremely efficient. So for me, it's Kelsey. But outside of her, if we're shooting in Los Angeles, I have a team of people that I like here very much, and they're always the first call anytime we're working here. But whenever I travel for work, they, depending on the size of the project, they'll usually let me bring one person, and that's always Kelsey. But the rest of the crew is, hey, you're in Romania. Here's your art department. This is Vlad, and here's uh, got Adi, and here's another Adi, and here's a third Adi, and you're like, everybody's named Adi. We had two Moogers. But that's how it is a lot of times. If it's here in Los Angeles, I have my people that are wonderful, and outside of Los Angeles, I'm like, it's a wild card. If I've worked in a town before, I'll try to hire those people I worked with last time if they're around. But a lot of times it's like, again, we did do a movie in Romania 3 years ago, and if I ever did another project there, I would call those people again. I just don't know if I'm ever going back to Romania to work on a project.
That's fair. How much of your work is, would you say, missing? As in, you spent 10 hours on every single little detail in a scene, and the cinematographer comes in and says, yeah, all this here and here, it's not seen.
A lot. Um, I'm going to say it's different on every project, but I'm going to say half of what we do doesn't wind up on camera in the final project. Whether it's we did the whole room, but we're only seeing this part of the room, or this entire scene got cut. We did a whole set and it just didn't make it into the movie. So like movie that just came out, Maxine, uh, entire sets, like giant sets, just don't see it. And other sets that we built, these giant massive spaces, and every nook and cranny is detailed, and you can open the closet and there's things in there, and you're like, we walk in the front door, look at the TV, and we turn back around and walk out. And I'm going, what the fuck? Like, why did we build all this? It's it's different, and again, some of it is it happens in the edit where we did shoot everything, and they, just for timing reasons, it made sense to cut it down. And other times it's, I'll blame directors that don't actually know what they want, and they say, because I'll walk into a space and say, hey, look, I'll use that piece of toast analogy. I'm like, do you know what your shots are in this space yet? Because we'll spend all our time just doing the stuff we're looking at, because that's one style of production designing where it's like, if you know what you want, I will just do that, and we'll spend all the time and money making that amazing. And sometimes they say, no, I want the option to look everywhere and maybe even look out the windows. And you go, okay, sure, we'll spread that butter around, and suddenly it's fine. It's just not as cool as it could have been. So in those cases, like there was a movie that Kelsey and I worked on in Canada during the pandemic that didn't, I don't think it turned out very good, To Catch a Killer. And it was that, where it was loads and loads and loads and loads of locations. And in every single one, he would just say, I want to be able to shoot the whole room. And you're like, huh, okay. I mean, we could hang a picture there and put some drapes on the window, but that's it, because we're in 27 locations in 25 days, and we just don't have the people or money to completely deck out every space we walk in 360. So I'm going to say roughly half of the stuff we do just doesn't make it in the final product.
That's fair. When I was rewatching the movies, I had to play a little bit of Where's Waldo. I have a few questions, and I think you know where they're going. In Palm Springs, that was a time loop one. Was it your photo on the shooting range that the guy was like, "Oh, my wife ran off with that guy"? In Sorry to Bother You, there was a book. Was that your face on the cover of the book? That's what I thought. Are you
Yeah,
in like every movie that you've worked on or every production? Because I also saw you in
it's
Interesting Ball. I saw you there and you were the guy on the beach.
yep. Those are all just because I happened to be there and it was convenient. So Interesting Ball was like a zero budget short film that they made, and I was there, and they're like, we need a cop. We need a cop number two. Jason, you're cop number two. Okay. Um, Palm Springs was the shooting range, as it was written in the script. I think it was supposed to be Osama bin Laden. Uh, I can't remember. It was like three different people, and we on the shooting range, and we made those targets. We had a graphic designer make custom Osama bin Laden, blah blah blah, and blah blah blah. And like a day or two before shooting, so we had to pass everything through the production company's legal department just to clear it for use. And they said, you can't use these. We said, but we created them. It's uh, custom artwork. And they said, no, we're not comfortable with this. So the director Max was in the art department office when he got that news. I read him the email. I was like, hey, they just kicked these back. We can't use them. And he was pissed. Fuck, I can't believe it. So stupid. He's like, Jason, just print out pictures of yourself and we'll use those at the shooting range. That was it. So we're like, okay, went to Facebook, grabbed a picture, printed it out, and sent it to the set. And so that's how that one happened. And then Sorry to Bother You was, it was a couple of weeks before shooting. And I had a list of things that we still needed to get done. And I was talking to Boots, and I was like, okay, Boots, so in the script, there's this character, Hal Jameson, and we need pictures of him for the Wall of Fame. And he's on the book cover. Like, we need to go take pictures of this person and do it. And it's like, who's Hal Jameson? He's like, well, he's a white dude in his 40s, and he's got a mustache and he's balding. It's like, you're Hal Jameson. I said, no, really. Just tell me who it is and we'll go take pictures of them, and we'll start making these things in photoshopping. It's like, no, it's you, Jason. You're him. So that was how that one happened. So it's never me trying to put myself in. It's just I happen to be standing there and they go, you put your picture in there. And to me it's fun. So I don't mind doing it. And it
Oh,
makes
that's
my life
awesome.
easier because we, solved that problem, didn't have to go find a person to take pictures of.
No, 100%. If I was in your position, I would put a little Easter egg somewhere random every time. If you're working on it, you might as well. Doesn't have to be something serious. I just think that's something cool. I remember I saw you the first time in Palm Springs. I paused it and thought, that looks really familiar. Isn't it the guy I'm emailing right now? I think it is.
Yeah, that's how it happened.
You mentioned legal issues on the Osama bin Laden one. Do you have any other crazy legal issues where it's the most random niche problem ever?
Yeah, it happens a lot. Um, and it's it's always frustrating because we're always just trying to like get the stuff done. Let's shoot the movie. Let's do all this cool stuff. And more the legal departments are getting involved because people like to sue people. And an example was this movie Maxine that we just worked on, and we had to create an entire video store filled with pornography, like 1980s pornography. And what we learned very quickly, and it was the director wanted it to be huge. I mean, there are like hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of videotapes in there. And what we learned very quickly is there are extremely strict legal rules with using pornography. So like not that we couldn't put it in the movie, it was more that we couldn't just go grab a videotape from 1985 and put it in the movie. They're like extremely strict. It's you would need the permission from the distributor, from the actor on the cover, and the photographer who took the photo of that person. And then you could use that videotape. And we're like, okay. And we need hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of those. So that's not going to happen. Let's see. Hold on. Okay. My wife is texting me.
All good.
And so then we said, okay, that's fine. We'll create them in Photoshop. So we went to iStock Photo where you can, download and pay to download photos. And they have very strict rules. You can't use any portraits of any person in a context of pornography. Even if it's not them naked, it's just like their face and they sold it to iStock and you can use it for, your vacuum cleaner business. You can't use it in a pornography context. So we're like, okay, shit. So what do we do? So we're like, okay, Midjourney. We're going to use AI to create all these images of fake people and use them on pornography. And they're like, this was like a year ago when it was all just AI was kind of starting up. And they're like, can't use that. We're like, okay, so what do we do? So what we did wind up, I think, hiring a few people and actually photographing them and using those in Photoshop mock-ups and there's like no nudity. It's just like, you know, banana boners 6, and there's a picture of a person on there. And I think we're able to license, we got a hold of one porno video company that was around in the 80s and got their, it took like 2 months to get this done, legal permission to use their artwork from their videotapes and magazines. And so but they didn't actually have physical copies of it. So like we were going on eBay and downloading images of, these obscure porn movies from the 80s and then just printing them out on a photocopier and stuffing them into VHS sleeves and stocking the video store with hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of these. So there's a lot of duplicates, but like that's an example of just legal stuff where I had no idea it was going to be that complicated. It was like, oh, this is a big project. We should probably get working on this. And the deeper we got into it, it's just like legal red tape. You can't do this, you can't do that. And the problem is they're still going to shoot it, and they're coming in, every few days asking me, hey, how's it going? Like, you guys are going to fill the video store with hundreds of videotapes, right? I'm like, yep, we're working on it. We need a little more time. So that, yeah. So that happens. I don't want to say all the time, but that's a good example of like that was like a big red tape thing we had to deal with.
Hmm. It's really interesting. I didn't know that there were so many rules about talking to the photographer, the actor, and the distributor. I would assume, you hit the distributor and you're fine, but no.
It's and different production companies have different lawyers and different levels of how cautious they want to be, because it's not all totally set in stone. And some lawyers are more cautious and they'll just say you can't use anything. You have to get a letter of clearance for everything in the movie. Every piece of furniture, every lamp. Like, where did that lamp come from? IKEA? Do you have a letter from IKEA that says you can use that lamp? And that happens more in commercials, but sometimes happens in movies. And I think on bigger movies where the stakes are higher, they are more and more cautious about what they feel they can get away with or use as fair use, and what they have to get a letter for.
Hmm.
um okay, cool. All right, what next?
This one's more kind of technical, but when you're given a script and whatever other assets they might hand you, how do you organize your thoughts? Do you have a mood board, a Pinterest, a Photoshop, and start acting like a crazy person, putting stuff up on the wall? How do you manage it?
um all of those things. So first I'll read the script, just I'll plow straight through it. And I what I've been moving almost my whole workflow to just Google Docs, Google Spreadsheets, Google Photos. And I have been leaning heavily into creating mood boards with just Google Photos, because you can arrange the photos. And I will build kind of like a mood and tone board for the movie, and it's usually pretty specific. I know some designers will pull very weird, you know, textures, and here's a ball of yarn, and here's a sunset on the moon. My references are usually a lot more literal. Like, I think this is what the place should look like. Here's the car they should be driving. Here are 10 images of different gas stations, and I feel it should feel like this. Um, and then I'll just start building more and more of these Google Photos boards. And I have a Google spreadsheet that, I can pull one up.
It would be
Okay.
awesome if I could see it, I won't copy it or anything.
No, no, no.
Hey, so quick explanation. At the end of the interview, we went over everything asked and said, and I made sure there was nothing that needed to be cut. Turns out, technically, what he showed me should not be published online.
All good. I think the only stuff, yeah, maybe the stuff in the room here is a little secret. And
However, with his permission, I made a rough copy of what he showed that doesn't spoil anything and still gives you a good idea of how he organizes his projects, what it looks like, alongside his explanation and description. And as you'll see from my next video, I've already taken some of his organizational ideas and implemented it for my game.
so, like, that's a reference board. And so, like, every single one of these is a link to a Google Photos board. And then kind of like what it is, what it's, if it's reference images, locations. And
Oh wow.
I'll use that to organize so I can find all these boards quickly. And then I'll invite Kelsey, the set deck, I'll invite the props department once they've started to start building their own boards. And right now, my whole workflow is just these pages and pages and pages of Google Photos boards. And I can show you, let's see, like, I have one from, okay, Maxine, construction. Okay, there's Google Drive. But that's my creative workflow. I will do some Photoshop mockups if needed. If it's as we get deeper and deeper into the process, my my references will get more and more specific and dialed in, to the point where I might do simple SketchUp models. I might do some Photoshop. Like, I'll go take pictures of a location and then Photoshop things into it. And again, none of it is like actual construction drawings or like amazing concept art. It's all just to communicate an idea. Like, it's this space, but we're going to paint it these colors and put desks here. And then this next board is here are different desks, and it has this funny, I'm sorry to bother you. It has a pole with a light bulb on the top of it. Here, these light bulbs, here's the pole, here's a mock-up of one of the desks and what it will look like. here's an overhead of the room and how they'll be laid out. And very rarely is it like a completed piece of, again, like beautiful concept art. It's more just like, here are the elements you need to execute this space if I weren't standing there telling you what to do. Like
No,
here
that's really
is,
interesting.
this was for Maxine, and I think this is what I read the script and I started pulling, all these images. It's like strip clubs, I think, different location images,
The nightclubs and stuff.
nightclub signage, video stores, behind the scenes on a low budget film set in the 70s, Los Angeles, 1985. So, oh, running out of time again. Yeah, I don't have the paid thing.
That's cool. I don't either.
Okay, let's see. So that's my workflow, and then like what I'll do is once we get into an office, I'll start printing out reference pictures and
Oh,
put them up
wow.
on the walls,
That's
and
cool.
so that other people can walk into the room. Like I can sit here and just stare at it, and it's inspiring. But to be honest, a lot of it is moving more and more into just digital boards. I still do like to print stuff out and keep it analog as much as possible, but it's getting harder and harder to do that just with time, and do we even have an office? Do we have walls to put stuff up on? Is anyone even going to see it other than me? So it's,
Hmm.
sometimes we do it and sometimes we don't.
In the one Sorry to Bother You scene, when he's showing the ad about the Sapiens, the horse people, right? At the beginning it says, film directed by Michel Dongri. Is that a reference to Gondry?
Yes, totally.
Okay, I'm very excited because I saw that and knew that looks really familiar. My favorite movie of all time is Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, directed by Michel Gondry and written by Charlie Kaufman. That's my favorite movie ever.
That was a big inspiration for Sorry to Bother You, and Boots referenced that constantly. And also, Michel Gondry is a big influence on the Daniels, who did Interesting Ball, Turn Down for What, Everything Everywhere All at Once. So they're both of those directors are, Boots and both the Daniels are, that's who they grew up watching and are, heavily inspired by his work.
That's awesome. Going back to Everything Everywhere All at Once, did you ever run into problems with the lights? Because every single universe seemed to have different color grading, different lights. There were probably a lot of strobe lights as well, I saw. How did you manage all that?
So there's the gaffer on that, Matt Ardeen, has worked with the Daniels as long as I have, and the same DP Larkin. But Matt was one of the first people that started using LED lighting for film, and Matt came from like a programming background, like light programming background, like something you'd see at like a stadium or a theater.
Hmm.
He started building his own, like he was the first person I ever saw that built the LED light mats that could change color temperature and just plug into house power to light a scene. And I don't want to say he invented LED lighting in film, but he was one of the first people I ever saw using that and using, like theater digital dimming boards to program and sequence and change the colors for lights. So on Everything Everywhere All at Once, he would rig every space that we were in with programmable LED lights. So in the office, it was all Astera tubes that he could from a board, and then he would map out in every area, and just like from the board he could be like, change the color temperature, make it flicker, make it red, change it this way. So he had full control over every space we were in, and that's how we did a lot of it, even in the think like in the back of the motorhome when they're sitting in there bouncing around working on computers in the Alphaverse, all of those TVs and computer screens, like we gutted them and put in LCD panels that were running out to one of his computer setups, and he could change the content on all of the screens and make them flicker and put this animation on that one. So none of the lighting on that was like, just kind of is what it is. It's like he fully controlled every light in every space and could do whatever he wanted with that. And then in addition to that, we had a few traditional movie lights, like, okay, close up on Evelyn, like, bring in the big lights and the diffusion. But all of that, even the strobe lights, those were film, they were like remote controlled battery powered light pucks that he gave to us, and then we made these emergency light housings that the pucks went inside of with magnets on the back. So when we'd go into a space and the strobes are flashing, we would just take them and go find something metal and stick it to it and stick them on the wall. And then from his computer, he could make them flash however he wanted to.
That's really cool. I didn't know about all that. I always assumed movies used LEDs or something basic.
They're becoming more and more common. It's very common now, but when we shot that, was it 2019, almost 5 years ago, it was like, I want to say it was about half and half. Like half of the film shoots were using LED lights at that time, and the other half were still using traditional lights. It's almost all LED now. It's like very rare to see, you know, unless it's like the giant 10K lights and you're like, we're recreating the sun right now. They'll bring those in. But yeah, for most stuff now, it's all LED sky panels and Vestera tubes.
Do you think Sorry to Bother You helped you later with Everything Everywhere All at Once? I saw in a handful of scenes you dipped your toes into weird stuff like the clay ad as a completely different medium to work with. And then in Everything Everywhere All at Once, you had the drawings, the paintings, all the new weird stuff.
Yes. So the claymation stuff, Boots had like a totally separate team lined up that handled that. Um, the drawings and things, we did some of them, and then I think they outsourced some of the actual animation elements in it. Um, it's, I think everything I've worked on, it's like I'm always building on top of what I've just done. So every project I do, I am using the tricks I learned on the last project and learning a few new tricks. So each time I go into another project, it's like my toolbox of tricks keeps growing. And I have these, old tricks that I can use, and maybe I have to develop a new trick for this next project because we're doing something I've never tried before. So I think if you did go chronologically through things that I've worked on, you'll start to probably pick out gags and go like, I saw that in this music video once, or I got really used to using in music videos air cannons, where it's just like a giant tube that you hook up to a compressed air tank, and whatever you dump in there, when you hit the button, it comes shooting back out. So we're gonna get cut off in a minute. Um, we used that like in the Joywave music video to shoot clothing. So we would jam clothing down this giant cannon and like one, two, three, boom, and it shoots clothing out everywhere. You can use that with like dust or debris and particles. So anytime there was an explosion, we would just fill it full of dust and debris and balsa wood, and hit the button and it comes shooting out. So that's one of my favorite things to still use whenever it's appropriate. It's like, oh, air mortars, let's just put a bunch of shit in there and we'll pop it out. um so there's that. And but like Turn Down for What was a big influence for Boots when we were talking about, again, that desk gag, and that was loosely based on the falling through the floor stuff that we had done on Turn Down for What.
In production design, obviously, a lot of people think about the sets you're in, the stuff around you. But how much do you affect or control the audio, the sound design of a scene?
Uh, almost nothing. So yeah, so it's I almost always assume that anything that I bring in that makes a sound or does something is probably going to be replaced by the sound designers in post. That said, occasionally they will come to me and say after the fact or while we're shooting, say, hey, that cell phone that's ringing, we want to use that, but we want to have control over it. So we'll film the scene without anything making noise, but then we'll actually take the cell phone over and they'll put a microphone on it and just get like clean audio of that sound so that later they can put it in at the right volume and have control over it. Because a lot of times something will be making a noise and they're cutting from here to here to here to here. Like imagine like a bubbling pot, a boiling pot, and you hear it percolating and bubbling, but they're cutting. So if they were actually using that audio, you would hear the glitches when they're cutting. So what they might have us do then is even shoot the whole scene, don't have the pot bubbling. And now that we're done, like let's get 30 seconds of pot bubbling and we'll turn it on and get it bubbling and they'll get 30 seconds of bubbling pot that they can then lay over that whole scene cleanly.
Makes sense. All right. Probably two more questions and then I'll let you leave. Is there any question that I should have asked you or you wanted to get asked but didn't come up? Kind of a tricky one.
Something that people ask me or when I was in the art department and I was interested in production designing, what I used to ask production designers is the very vague question of how did you get to be a production designer or how did you get to where you are today? And everybody had a wildly different story, a different origin story. Oh, I went to this, I went to art school. I was a plumber for 10 years. Totally different. But the common thread with all these people seemed to be I've been doing this for about 10 years and I've worked for free a lot over the years. And here I am, I'm a production designer somehow. And that's very loosely my story too, where I have a completely different background and origin story, but been doing it for about 10 years. And, over the years, I've worked for free a lot. And here I am. Somehow I became a production designer. But that to me was the takeaway from that, I think, is really more the 10 years. It's very, very few people just go become the head of a department and are working on real projects. It's almost everybody's forced to climb each step of the ladder on small projects and they slowly get bigger and bigger. Sometimes people leap ahead somehow, but it's a long path. And that's something I like to explain to people is you can totally get there. Anybody can do it. It's just be prepared to say, hey, this is what I want to do. And I want to spend years working on this craft. And like I was telling you earlier, it's like every project I do, I'm building my bag of tricks. And so on the next one, I in my mind, I'm more valuable than I was 2 years ago because I've done 2 more years worth of projects. And on those projects, I have new experiences and new tricks that I've learned to bring to this next project. So that's to me, I think that's valuable information for anybody who's interested in pursuing this is like, don't expect to get here tomorrow. You'll get there, but enjoy the journey.
That's fair. Yeah, that's good advice.
Yeah.
And maybe one more question. How do you think I did interviewing you? And is there anything I can fix, change, or improve?
So I I really enjoyed your email that you sent. It was articulate. and it was politely written. And I do get, I don't want to say a lot of emails, but I get a lot of emails, and I don't always respond to all of them, and I don't always follow through and actually talk to people. Um, it's hard to carve out the time to do it, and sometimes I think there are people that I just don't know if they would actually get anything from it. I'm like, and I hate to judge people before I meet them, but sometimes I'll get an email that comes in. I'm like, man, I don't have time for this. Your email was just so polite and again, well written and respectful. And I was like, you know what? You seem like you've got your shit together. Like, I will happily talk to you. So I think that's all it really is. It's you know, also just even the fact that you reached out, because at your age I was extremely shy, and the world was terrifying to me, and the idea, like, there were people I would have loved to have talked to, but it just didn't. I mean, also the internet didn't exist, so it was harder
Yeah.
to track people down and talk to them. But it just didn't even occur to me that I could have done that, like reach out to somebody I was interested in talking to or learning from. And so I that was also why I asked you at the very beginning, like, what was the inspiration for this? Because I wish that when I was younger, I would have done that, and I didn't. So, um, yeah, I think your questions were great. Also, it's nice that you did a little homework, because I've
Oh
talked
yeah.
to some people who are just like, tell me things you've worked on. I'm like, sure, I'll rattle off the things that I've worked on. They're like, oh, I haven't seen any of those. I'm like, okay, is there anything else you want to know?
That's really boring. I mean, I went through and looked at your IMDb, I rewatched a few movies, and I saw the music videos. I saw the KFC ad even. Like I went through it. I was like, dang, even more interesting than I thought. There's some cool stuff here.
um, I'll end it with the favorite thing that I've worked on is the Shins music video for Simple Song is the name of the song. And that was like such an important project for my career and for relationship building. And the short of it was, I had worked with the Daniels a couple times on their first few music videos, and it went really well. And then I heard through the grapevine that they were driving up to Oregon to go do a music video with the Shins, because the Shins were up there. And they weren't inviting me to come along with that. They were going to try to hire a local production designer up there when they got there. And they got there and they started interviewing production designers. And the concept of the music video is this wrecking ball is smashing through a house as stuff is happening. And again, they had like no money, no time to actually do this. And every production designer they talked with said, this is impossible. You have to build this on a sound stage, and you would actually, wreck it with this, and it will take 3 weeks to build it and $30,000 to build the set. And they said, no, we've got like, 1,500 bucks to do all the production design. And everyone said, like, not interested. So I get a phone call from them, and and I know that they're up there, and I'm like, hey, what's going on, guys? They're like, well, we're up in Oregon, we're going to work on this music video. What are you doing next? It wasn't even next week. What are you doing in 3 days? And I was like, well, it's my birthday in 3 days. Well, why do you ask? They said, well, we're wondering if you want to drive up here and figure out this problem that we have. So I had 2 days here in Los Angeles to quickly pack up. I still have it, this big old Chevy Suburban, which is in a bunch of things I've worked on. And it's in that music video, the driving away as the family's waving. Packed it full of stuff. And then we also had a cargo van that we packed full of stuff. And it was my birthday, and I was going to drive up in one shot. It's like a 16-hour drive to drive straight from Los Angeles to Portland, and it was on my birthday. It was raining, and it made way more sense to bring that guy Jesse that I was telling you about and leave. And then Kelsey was going to come the next day in the van with another guy named Hugh. And I was like, you know what? Selfishly, if I'm going to spend my birthday driving for 16 hours in my old Chevy Suburban up to Portland, I'd rather ride with Kelsey. And this was before we were dating. And so I remember telling Jesse, I was like, hey, Jesse, Kelsey's riding with me to go up. He's like, but wouldn't it make more sense? Like, Kelsey's coming with me. So it was personally, it was a fun experience because I got to spend this whole day hanging out with Kelsey. And this was like 2 weeks later, she broke up with her boyfriend and we started dating. So, from a relationship standpoint, this was kind of the trip that solidified me and Kelsey eventually getting married. But then also going up there, doing the music video, it was a one take thing. We were in the attic of this big old house. We built a fake wall and it was a one take thing. We had a yoga ball that we had texture painted to look like a wrecking ball with a big plastic chain, and then an air cannon filled with balsa wood and debris. So imagine here's the wall, and there's a window, a fake window there, and what's supposed to happen, and you're the camera, and it's supposed to look like the wrecking ball is coming through the window and smashing the wall towards the camera as the band is standing here and they're all jumping out of the way as the wrecking ball comes through. And again, we have like $20 to figure this out. So I'm in real life, I'm sitting behind the wall, like straddling the air cannon between my legs, like I'm riding a horse. And then I've got the button to blow it up in this hand, and I have the wrecking ball, the yoga ball in this hand, holding it back to let it go. And then on the front of the wall, it was this big fake wall that we had built, and we tied rope, we cut it with a saw in the back, and we tied ropes to it. My favorite part, there's a beam on the ceiling, and they pull a nail out, and you see the beam falling. So what it's supposed to look like is this wrecking ball crashes through the wall splits open, the beam falls through the ceiling, and debris shoots everywhere. And this is at the very, it's one of the last shots we did at the end of day 2. And I'm sitting back there and my heart is pounding so hard because I'm thinking, this is it. This is going to make or break my career. Like, if this goes well, they're going to hire me on everything moving forward from this project. And if this fails, they're never going to call me again. So we're sitting there, 3, 2, 1, go. I let go of the wrecking ball. I hit the thing as they pull the ropes, the thing falls, everything happens, the dust settles, they call cut. I run over to the monitor to go watch the replay to see if we got it. And it was, I would say it's like 90% perfect. Like, the timing is a little off. Like, it's fine for what it is. But at that moment in time, it was so important to me that this went well. And I attribute like my marriage and my career to this music video and this moment in time where all, like, everything kind of aligned perfectly. So of everything I've ever worked on, like, to me still that's like the most important thing. And I watched that, and when I rewatched that, there's like just so much nostalgia for all the things that were happening in my life when this project came together. And I think it's a great music video. It's like a 3-minute Wes Anderson movie. The narrative, and this was again a testament to the Daniels and their storytelling. Like, this incredible story, being layered story of, watch it and try to figure out exactly what's happening. You'll probably have to watch it like 10 times before you catch all the little Easter eggs and the setups and the payoffs. Like, oh, the little boy hands her this bracelet, but now they're adults, and she looks, and she's still wearing the bracelet that he gave her when they were 10 years old. And at the birthday party when he was 8, he hit the thing with the bat, and it's insane. But that's it.
Well, that's great. That's awesome. It was wonderful talking to you, hearing about it all. I learned a lot more than I thought, honestly. I was prepared to learn a good bit, but now I'm hearing about all the technical details, the lamps and the TVs, and it's awesome. what you do for work is very, very cool.
Thanks, Callum. Um, that said, feel free to stay in touch. I'm happy to talk again sometime if you ever want to. If you have more questions, you can even email me if it's just like a simple one-off thing. If you're like, I watched this thing, how did you do this? Like, feel you've got my info. Feel free to reach out anytime.
Absolutely. All right. Thank you so, so much. And I want to thank you for watching and thank Jason Casfarde again for responding to my email and having this long, lovely interview that I learned so much from. This was a amazing experience to me. I enjoyed every second, and I'd love to do something like this again, actually. But thank you for watching.